Just to introduce first myself, my name is Andrew Wallace. I'm the CEO of Believe Media, also a proud member of the board of the Fight with Kash Foundation. And we do have two sponsors here today. Number one would be the Patel Law Group. If you want to win, go with Patel.
I didn't even have to pay him for that.
Thank you. Well, they've won for me. So. and second, the Fight with Kash Foundation. So special shout out to the Kash crew on Truth Social and the ambassadors in the back of the room here. Cool community here around the Kash Foundation, and it's very exciting. We have a couple of board members here as well. Jesse is on the board, Kash is on the board, and Bill back in the back. We've got Bill back here. So thank you very much to the sponsors, and to introduce our panelists. First, we have Jesse, the founding partner of the Patel Law Group, and newly engaged, I might add. Experienced litigator whose practice mainly includes constitutional law, political law, white-collar criminal defense, where he fights prosecutions and investigations targeting those in politics or business. Kash Patel down at the end. Hey, Kash. Kash Patel served as Chief of Staff to the Department of Defense under Secretary Christopher Miller during the Trump administration. Principally, he was the principal deputy to the acting director of national intelligence under Rick Grinnell. He ran the Russia investigation under Congressman Devin Nunes. And if you don't already know, he's a former federal prosecutor. Also, the founder of the foundation and author of the upcoming book, Government Gangsters. Erica Knight. Hi, Erica. Strategies International, highly sought after PR strategist. She is one of the most respected communications managers in the nation. A lifelong conservative, Erica saw a void in the industry and made herself an essential player in giving voice to people in the America First movement by securing billions in media coverage to amplify their message. Erica Knight, everybody. Jekielek is a senior editor, Epoch Times, host of American Thought Leaders. In 2009, he joined the Epoch Times full-time and has served as writing, including as website chief editor. He is producer of the award-winning Holocaust documentary film, Finding Manny. Jan. Let's have in here yet. He may walk in, so if he walks in, we'll announce him. But we do have a wonderful guest, Daniel Boston, who's actually currently walking in. So Daniel, we're really glad to have you. So we're going to kick it off with some experience. And so let's dig in kind of from a 50,000 foot view. And Jan, we'll start with you, but in very basic terms, I mean, how has fake news affected you and the work that you do on a daily basis?
Wow. I kind of think of the Epoch Times as the anti-fake news. So, we have been affected in all sorts of ways by, let's call it, hit pieces, very, very slanted media coverage. But in another sense, and it's almost kind of embarrassing to say this, we've actually benefited quite a bit from the fake, because all these people out there actually want real news. And there's so little of it to be had. A lot of people come to Epoch Times. And I believe by paid subscribers right now, we're the #4 newspaper in the nation. And that's fantastic. That's because people want real news. That's the most significant way that we've been affected by, what you would call fake news. Should we spread it around a little bit?
Yeah, we definitely want to spread it around.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a panel, so let's go on down the line.
Thanks, Andrew. And it's one of the things that my colleagues and I are able to do is help people who have a legal case fight back against fake news. And I'm sure we'll have a chance today to talk a little bit more in detail about that. But fake news is, it's touched my life a lot individually as well over the years. And especially, once you are known as a lawyer for, anybody in the MAGA movement, certainly if it's people like Donald Trump or Michael Flynn, et cetera. And they, the media establishment is very happy to do the dirty work of those in the administrative state and go after those of us lawyers that are willing to do that, that are willing to stand up for America First principles. So you get hit pieces against you. A lot of times for hit pieces, there's really no remedy you have. You just got to suck it up and find other ways to fight back. And then sometimes the hit pieces are complete lies. And then you have to make the decision about whether a lawsuit is right or not. So recently, I had a piece come out against me, in some actual mainstream media newspapers, and you look at it, like, actually, this is like provably false. It's provably false. It meets, what we'll talk about is the actual malice standard. It's provably false. I should sue them. And then I said to myself, I thought it through, and I said, what advice would you give your client if they were in your shoes? And it would be, this one's probably not a lawsuit, even though I could bring the lawsuit, it would actually bring more attention to something that it was a 5-minute story. So it's something that touches us all. Every single person in this room is probably going to have to go through it in one way or another if you're going to be a relevant fighter for these important principles. And one of the best things that you can do is, first of all, develop thick skin. And second of all, have good people that you can rely on to tell you what's the best way to fight back, because it's not a one-size-fits-all type remedy. Sorry, Eric.
Nobody wants to give me a microphone. So, I think for me, like Jesse was saying, like some of these lawsuits are not a legal problem, but I've gotten calls from Jesse and said, you know what? This, a lot of these things that I'm dealing with, it's just a communications problem. It's not a legal problem. And I think I've probably battled the fake news for almost everybody on this panel. Not you, Jan, yet, but it's crazy. The types of things that these people will follow and hit you with is absolutely insane. And they don't care what they write. They don't care if it's true. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten the most ridiculous accusations about, especially the guy on the end there. They follow him everywhere. I remember there was a day that I thought he was in Nashville, and I started getting calls at like 3 a.m. And they were like, did you know that Kash is like in DC in front of a grand jury? And I'm like, no, he's not. Like, he's in Nashville. And they're like, well, yeah, we saw him out there. And I'm like, you are literally sitting outside the Capitol waiting for someone to just, create some kind of stupid story about it. It's absolutely insane and invasive how these people operate. And like you guys are saying, we need to fight back against it. And thankfully there's good outlets like Epoch Times that are willing to actually tell the truth and tell the stories like they are, rather than just making up things about people to essentially ruin their lives. Is that what you wanted, Andrew?
That was beautiful, Erica.
Hey, my name is Daniel Bostic. Probably a lot of you here don't know me. That's because I'm not a limited purpose publication. I'm also actively in a lawsuit over a fake news article, which my lawyer Jason is sitting right there. And so I assume that if I say anything, he'll just stand up and throw up an objection. I'm not supposed to say it, or maybe Jason could do that too. But no, my claim to fame is that I helped start a very small organization back in 2018. It's not very well known. It's called Stop the Steal. And I actually was not involved in anything really at all related to January 6th. However, and actually, to be perfectly honest with you, I spent a large portion of January 6th hiding in a bathtub in my hotel room because I thought that I heard explosions and things going on outside. However, a couple weeks later, I awoke to a story on the Daily Dot, which is one of these we'll probably talk about this, one of these sort of left-wing publications that operates under the guise of the news, but is really an activist group, if we're being honest. Maybe some dubious sources of funding. And there's a lot of these groups that pop up, Salon, Daily Beast. And yeah, there are some gems out there. And I awoke to a headline that said that I personally organized a movement to overthrow the United States government on January 6th, which was news to me. And it's kind of amusing because, the FBI doesn't think that I did, Congress didn't think that I did, no one in law enforcement thought that I did, but the Daily Dot apparently figured it out. And I think that I've been in politics for a long time, but I think for me, it was a little bit of a reality check moment because it's one thing when you see your friends kind of getting drugged through the media and you think, okay, you kind of signed up for it. But it's another to wake up with an article like that and then realize that for the rest of your life, there will be an article under your Google search results that says you are a riot organizer or an insurrectionist. And learning to grapple with that and like the implications on my life and then having to explain to family, friends, clients that I did not, in fact, try to overthrow the United States government, really was not a lot of fun. And to be honest, there's people out there that had it way, way worse than me. But I was just in a unique position because of the claims that were made and because of my lack of involvement in this case, to file suit against them in the state of Texas, where they are headquartered. And so we are fighting that out. And I actually haven't really announced this, but they filed a motion to dismiss, and their motion to dismiss was denied. So we will be, I guess, keep grinding through the system. So I'm very excited. Yeah.
I'm not going to talk a lot. Thanks for coming. The foundation and Justice Law Firm and Erica's work and everybody up here, got together along with all the ambassadors back there, and we created something that is impacting American lives. We're able to fund lawsuits for others in need. So that's the whole point. To fighting the fake news, the best way to do this is get a judicial decision that shows how corrupt they are. It's being defamed is one thing, but being brave enough to go and take your case to court like Daniel did is another, because that just puts you on a whole other amplification level. Everybody's going to find out about it. So we hope to continue that work. We hope there are others I know in the works. I know I've got multiple defamation cases, but no one cares about that. But we came together to do this, and it's very humbling that so many would give their time, their money, their effort to put it together. So yes, Andrew, the fake news exists, but not in believe media.
But Kash, what was your first real taste? What was the moment where you? I mean, I'm assuming it was when you were arrested in Russiagate, right?
Yeah, during Russiagate, shipping staff leaked to I think it was the Daily Beast, which is like the worst publication on earth. An outing of staff for a Congress is unheard of. Members of Congress are in the media, not the staff. And they called me a genocidal dictator, which is ironic since I'm the son of a man who actually fled a genocidal dictatorship. That's a story for another day. So I knew once they went there, there were no more rules. And if they were coming after me, they were going to come after a lot of other people. And they haven't stopped, really. But as I heard in one of the earlier discussions today, is that once you get past that initial inflection point, then you can really do something to change the way the news operates, because you show them you just don't care about their garbage propaganda.
So on that note, what are some of the most common sources of fake news, aside from like the ones that we know? So like Daniel alluded to the Daily Dot. I had never heard of the Daily Dot until I heard about Daniel's case. So, you know, aside from CNN, what are some of the most common sources? And also, what are the tools that we have in our tool belt to combat them?
Maybe I'll jump in, because I think that at the Epoch Times, I don't know how many of you know this, but we were founded by Chinese Americans. It's actually about 23 years ago right now. And, you know, of course, we were a lot smaller back then, but why were we founded? That is the question. So our president, John Tong, he was in the student movement in Tiananmen Square, right? And so he actually left after that, came over to America, found freedom, never went back. And then in 1999, the Chinese regime started persecuting the Falun Gong, and basically all sorts of, you know, you want to talk fake news. This was, you know, the most egregious fake news, straight out of 1930s Germany type stuff, right? So he started a little website to tell the truth, and it grew like crazy for the same reasons I was mentioning earlier, because people want the truth, right? But what did we face, right? We faced the biggest source of fake news in the world, funded to the tune of tens of billions of dollars, which is the Chinese Communist Party. So I know you were thinking probably in America, right? I think you were thinking that, but actually, you know, this source of fake news has had a profound impact on American politics, on American media. This was actually one of the reasons Epoch Times was founded, because a lot of American media were taking Chinese Communist Party talking points and taking them as truth, right? As if it were, you know, impartial information. Where have we seen this before, right? So we were canceled from the beginning. we were attacked from the beginning. We never expected, this is me talking to our founders, we never imagined that it might happen from US media or US institutions. It was just kind of shocking and stunning, because this is the place where the freest ability to speak in the world exists today. And it remains this way today, by the way, I might add, right? We don't want to forget that, because people say, well, you know, these are dark days, and they may well be. However, it remains the freest place for free speech. So let's not forget that, and let's use it.
Let me take that and even jump 1 second forward and probably say what, you know, maybe you on one, and that is the free marketplace of ideas is still the best weapon that we have against fake news. And media outlets like Epoch Times are going to be one of the key ways that we win this battle. So for somebody who has absolutely nothing to do with the Epoch Times, let me just say, if right now you sitting in this room with people watching us on Rumble and Truth aren't subscribed to the Epoch Times, do it. It's worth every single dime to get real news. And in order to put your money where your mouth is for a relatively very small sum of money, to be able to take and fight back against fake news by making sure that a good news outlet and others like it, not just Epoch, but others, make sure that you're supporting them as well, for the ones that are putting out good, solid journalism about stuff that actually matters. I can't tell you how many times I, as a lawyer, have actually found really valuable stuff about cases I was involved in from Epoch Times. And so just a little bit of a plug there for what you all are doing. But let me also say that one of the other things we need to do is, where is most of the news coming, or not most, where's a good chunk of the fake news coming from? Not necessarily an outlet. How about the United States government? How much of this stuff is coming either directly or through leaks from bad actors in the United States government? How much of it is, and Kash actually talked about this morning on his panel, where you have the administrative state, deep state, whatever you want to you want to call it, working hand in glove with the fake news press to put out this disgusting false narrative into the world. Let me tell you something that my law firm just did minutes ago. We just filed a $50 million lawsuit on behalf of General Michael Flynn. On behalf of an American hero who went through years of hell because of what people in the United States government put him through, and information and lies that were parroted by the fake news. And so that's one of the key things we need to go after, is not just the media outlets themselves, but the bad actors. You know, also this week, Democrats in Congress leaked the name of FBI whistleblowers, one of them represented by our law firm, to try to target them and embarrass them because they were helping the subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government. So it's not just executive branch, it's also the legislative branch. This is the tools of the left. It's even the judicial branch, which I never thought I'd see in my life, leaking, you know, but with left-wing people involved in the judicial branch, leaking judicial opinions. So bad actors are all over our government. We have to hold them accountable as well. Sorry, Erica.
Oh, you want me to say something now?
You don't have to
I mean, I can tell you all about who's the fake news. I mean, everybody's pumping up Epoch Times and stuff, but you want to know who the bad people are?
Yeah.
I mean, do you want a list? Like, I got a text yesterday. They'll kind of pop up and pretend to be your friend, digging for things, and it's very interesting because these outlets will spend all of their time digging and try to go after people like Kash or anybody in the MAGA movement, just looking for anything and everything to say about him. And then, you could walk up and, have the most horrible thing to say about Adam Schiff and they'll just bury it, So it's very, very interesting to watch how obsessed they are with taking people on our side down. And it's sad. I mean, I got a text from the Washington Post. There's one for you. That's one of the worst culprits. Just hi. And I looked at Kash yesterday and I was like, what did you do? Thankfully, it wasn't anything, but they're dangerous. They'll come to people like me and they'll try so hard to, pretend to be really nice and say, my favorite line is like, we're gonna, this is gonna be a really, really positive story. We're not gonna make them look bad. Just please, give us some comment. And I'm like, there is no way I'm answering that question. Like, it's absurd. Do you want this going down?
No, I think Daniel can.
I can.
Yeah, he's got it.
I've got another one in my pocket if you're.
Go ahead.
Okay. Jan, we got to talk a little bit about this last night, but in general terms, what tools do corporations use to control narratives, people, and ultimately speech? So from the corporate level.
Why don't we start on the other end?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So you can go to big tech. Yeah, so part of what I said was, and they're not every the outlets we're talking about, there are still some good reporters left at some of those outlets. It's just that they've been so tarnished by the overarching fake news they've been putting out, we can't trust any of them anymore to report accurately. It's not like we don't want to go to them and talk to them because they have audiences. They have people by the millions that read their material. We have to be able to reach them. And one way we do it, we do it heavily is on Truth Social, is by breaking down the censorship platforms. But when you have big tech like Facebook, Google, YouTube, whatever, and now we know that there are weekly meetings with the FBI leading up to elections on speech suppression and whatnot. We're just starting to learn the level of government, private sector, corporation interference in the news cycle. We lived it during Russiagate, Ukraine impeachment, and insert whatever origins of COVID, etc. But corporations, what I told the folks in the audience today was, everybody asked, what can you do to help, whether it's combat fake news or share conservative values or whatever. And And I said, it's simply this, it's probably this thing, stop using big tech. It's not that hard, but it's hard for many Americans. You don't like rigged elections? Don't give money to Facebook. Get off Twitter. Don't talk to the companies and help them enrich themselves who have literally sat there and got in bed with the government to rob us of our right to have free speech. That's where you can start. And
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think that often on the right, there is a bit of a maybe an information gap or strategy gap when it comes to how to handle these outlets. And that's where something like America comes in. But I think about it often, I'm like, I see these influencers on the right, these MAGA people, sometimes will give quotes to some of these outlets. And in my mind, every time I think of that, I'm like, okay, well, it's not like Democrats are giving quotes to like Breitbart or Gateway Pundit. So my view, I think that people generally should just pretend like they don't exist as long as possible, because otherwise we're just sort of feeding the beast over and over again. I'll talk to Epoch Times all day long, or someone who actually is going to write an objective, honest story. But some of these outlets that pop up, and I frankly I'm not entirely sure where a lot of these outlets come from, but they do get significant traffic, and I can tell you as someone who's on Reddit, people do read them because they get ranked by Google as part of big tech. These are the outlets that no one has ever heard of that are ranking at the top of everyone's search results, and so they use them like a targeted hit squad to go after people. They're doing it now with the January 6 people who, some of them have misdemeanor charges, and you have these left-wing outlets who are just running pieces on them. Their name is here, they have this many kids, they have, this is their wife, they live in this town, and it's intentionally targeted and it's designed to take people out. And so I think that a lot of people just need to learn to be really careful when they're engaging with these sorts of people, because they're not good actors of political activists.
And if I can jump in, I understand we're here at CPAC and this is a very conservative audience, right? But this, media functioning the way that Daniel was just describing is a huge, to me, it's almost an intractable problem. And I would love to hear from the panelists any thoughts you might have on this. But when media do a lot of, frankly, lying, right? This is what we're calling fake news or whatever, or misdirection. And and a lot of people have relied on this, these same media for a long time, but they've kind of crept into this place of just simply not reporting the truth or shaping narratives, shaping whole visions of the world, as we've learned through the Twitter files. How do we deal with that? At Epoch Times, we of course have a very strong conservative readership. We actually have quite a significant middle of the road readership too, of people, for example, in health freedom and so forth, that aren't necessarily conservative. But our goal is to be a media for everyone, right? Just a place where you can find good information, right? Of course, we're always going to be center right? Of course, we're going to have a more truth and tradition. That's our tagline. That's not changing, right? But how do we deal with this issue that there's some significant portion of the population that simply is getting fed bad information, and and it's hard to kind of step away. If there's anything we've learned over the past few years, is how powerful groupthink can be, and how powerful the need to conform, right, out among our friends is. Many people have did things against their better judgment.
How this stuff comes from, and I think people need to realize that a lot of times the stories that are being told are controlled from the top too. I mean, you'll see major news outlets that, one day they'll decide, hey, we're not going to cover Trump anymore. We're not going to allow anybody that's associated with Donald Trump anywhere near us. And, somebody like Kash, who's on TV every single day, and they'll go on and it'll be like, he'll be on one network over and over and over again. And then all of a sudden Trump will say something that makes people mad, and which, happens, and they'll completely cut it, and then it's, you know, it's not the producer of a show, it's not somebody above them. Like, these orders come straight from the top. I mean, I live in Arizona, and Carrie Lake had a really great campaign app where she compiled, I don't know, 200 shots of reporters on just, you know, local news shows saying the exact same thing about COVID. And it's, you know, people need to understand that there are people behind the scenes feeding you the messages that you're hearing over and over and over again. It's not, you know, the favorite journalist that you see on TV that's reading your morning news. I mean, they didn't write that. They're reading what they're being told to say, and who's giving them that information, and then who's giving the people at the top. You know, somebody told me today, I don't know where government stops and the media begins. And that's so true. Like, it's a problem. And I really think that we all need to, you know, fight back to make sure that Americans are being told the truth.
Next question, Andrew.
Let's go.
Jesse, I've got one that's kind of aimed at you. What's the legal underworkings of a defamation lawsuit? At what point is it worth filing? And what's the likelihood of success? And what's, you know, like go deep, because we have a really intelligent audience here. So give it to us straight.
Yeah, thank you.
Go deep, but don't go super nerd.
I only know nerdy. I mean, I didn't bring my glasses, but so here's what you need to know about a defamation lawsuit. First and foremost, they are hard. They are especially tough to bring. It is the only tort in the country where every defamation case is technically, you know, under state law, but the Supreme Court of the United States said, if you are going to sue under this cause of action, there are important constitutional ramifications. And so you need to meet higher standards in order to satisfy that. So let me tell you a little bit more about what that means. First of all, if you are somebody who's a public person, or even possibly somebody who's a limited public figure involved in one particular event, then or in certain other cases, you have to show something that's called actual malice. And what actual malice is it's not enough that the information, first of all, let's start at the very beginning. Defamation only works if what's being said about you is factually wrong. And it can't just be an opinion. It can't just be, you know, John Smith is a radical Republican. That is probably going to be just an opinion. It's not going to be something that factually you can say is true or not true. If you have that escalated actual malice standard, which in a lot of our defamation cases we have to deal with, then what that means is you have to show that the publication that published the information knew it was false, or published it with reckless disregard for the truth. It can't just be enough that, oh, you really should have been able to figure that out. It's like anybody with half a brain would have been able to figure it out without going too far into the nerd part of it. So they're really, really hard cases to win, but they are winnable. They are cases that you can pursue them in such a way that you can correct the record. For the most part, unless you're Johnny Depp or maybe Kyle Rittenhouse or Nick Sandman, don't expect to get rich off of a defamation lawsuit most of the time. There are exceptions for this, but most of the time, don't expect to get rich. Most of the time, the main goal of the defamation lawsuit should be to correct the record, that you have a reputation that needs to be corrected. And then you got to think on another aspect. Am I making more attention to bringing more attention to a non-entity story by bringing a lawsuit than if I would be if I let it go or had a calm reaction to it using my brilliant friend to my left here, Erica, rather than giving me money? For the most part, with media issues, let me tell you something that our chief operating officer is here, so I'm sorry. You are probably better off paying Erica money than paying me money for a communication problem. 9 times out of 10, that's the God's honest truth. But when they do something that's going to stick around forever, that you need, that they have lied about you, or said something with absolute reckless disregard for the truth, and that's when you can come to us, and we're gonna throw punches, and we're gonna fight hard. But yeah, think about what the right remedy is. It's not always a lawsuit. Anybody else have anything to say on defamation? Cash, you have any?
No, I'm a former lawyer.
How can we balance the need to combat fake news with principles of free speech and the open exchange of ideas?
Where did you get this question?
I wrote some of them.
Wow.
I got some of them from
Fire.
some of them from Truth Social. You want to know? You want to know the honest truth? I did ask ChatGPT.
This actually just dovetails into
perfect.
I was just saying, and it's the First Amendment is extremely important. The First Amendment applies to the government not being able to tell you how to live your life, not how to live your life, of course. Not being able to tell you what you can say. This idea in a Supreme Court case, New York Times versus Sullivan, that gave us this actual malice standard that's constitutional, it's nationwide. It's hogwash. And there's at least a couple of justices on the Supreme Court that acknowledge that. And there are other places, like for instance in the UK, not always speaking of civil liberties. As a matter of fact, I think we had some kind of little fight of that a couple of years ago. But where our kind of law evolves from, where they actually give more protection to people in the public sphere because they are the ones whose live, eat, and breathe based on their reputation. So it's a silly standard that we have on this. The First Amendment, freedom of speech, is extremely important. But the right to lie about someone or even negligently misrepresent somebody is not in the First Amendment. It was judicial activism from a judicial activist court. We should get rid of that standard. Although I don't know, other media entities would agree with me on that. But that's what I think about the First Amendment. I would be really interested to hear what an actual media thought about that.
To be honest, I'm just beginning to kind of dig into the realities of this whole. First of all, the First Amendment is something that's I don't know if it's entirely unique to America, but it's a lot more important here than a lot of other places, including my native country of Canada. Right? There's, you guys might remember some years ago, Jordan Peterson coming out against what effectively became compelled speech laws. Right? This is something that would be almost impossible to imagine here. Right? And pause that. I've become over time. I used to be much more on the side of, it's okay to, for example, Holocaust denial. There's examples of things that I imagined, are kind of beyond the pale, right? But lately, I've become more and more of a free speech absolutist, including things which I find really abhorrent, right? Quite simply because, again, and I'll mention the Twitter files again, because they were a very high profile way of seeing how whole conceptual ways or understandings can be kind of excluded from the public discourse because of the combined power of, big government, big tech, big pharma, for example, over the last few years. So the ability to be able to share information that sounds possibly outrageous, right? But turns out to be the actual truth. These questions, there needs to be this marketplace of ideas. that Jesse was talking about, unquestionably. And I think some of the crazy ideas and some of the really, I don't know, I guess reprehensible ideas, I'm beginning to think that I want to allow them out there so that they can be beaten down by the better ideas. And I'm just trying to figure all this out, right, to be perfectly honest, right? I don't know what this would look like. I don't know, what Jesse's talking about. I don't know what the legal framework for this looks like. This is something we need to study very carefully.
Let's bring it in for a landing here. We're almost out of time. What are some of the success stories and lessons learned from previous efforts to combat fake news, and how can we build on these experiences?
You get guys like our friend, my former boss, Devin Nunes, who's just not taking a knee on defamation cases he's filed. He's won some massive victories in the federal circuit courts of appeals in this country, and that's how you change the way for other Americans to follow suit. Because Devin Nunes is a public figure, it's very difficult for him to win those types of cases. And if he can win some, then a lot of Americans who aren't in the public light can win many. And so I just highlight that because, we work in tandem on a lot of matters for a lot of years. And he's bringing those cases because it's just, he ain't getting rich from them. But the point is, someone's got to go through the door first. And if you do that, then we can have other great Americans like Daniel willing to step up and say, well, it's not acceptable that media is defaming American citizens. And he's doing it for himself, but he's doing it for a whole host of other people that don't have what it takes to do that. And it's not easy. It's not a knock. You want to live a private life, that's totally your call. When you bring on a defamation case, you're not living a private life anymore, pretty much ever again. So I think you all should just follow some of those cases and look at those victories and how monumental they are. And that's why you get to file more cases like Mike Flynn's case today, because they paved the way for the law to be adjudicated in a manner that no longer suppresses free speech and also at the same time doesn't permit the media to get away with their reckless abandon hatred for certain Americans.
And I was just thinking back, I actually was one of the people that helped the Covington Catholic kids shortly after the story broke on the steps here in Washington, D.C. And I remember talking with a lot of parents who were really just, to be honest, like sobbing on the phone uncontrollably because they thought that for the rest of my child's life, he or she is going to be considered a Nazi. And I think that I do believe that there is hope, and I believe that that story in particular showed us that because those kids have totally had their, I wouldn't say that everything's perfect and back to normal, but I think you'll find that the public consensus after the lawsuits and the lawfare that was used, after all that stuff worked out in the judicial system, the public consensus, even from a lot of our maybe friends not really on the left, is that they were done wrong. And so I do believe that there is a lane that we can run in. It's going to take competent attorneys. It's going to take competent people like Erica. It's going to take people to step up and, you want to step into the spotlight and deal with, discovery and cases and all that stuff. And it's going to take people like Kash and those kinds of organizations to help fund it and to help get the word out about it. But I do believe that I can.
I'll just make one comment. I think that there's an issue with the amplification of speech, right? Because, you could imagine anyone can have an opinion on anything. They could say it could be egregious and so forth. But if that egregious idea is picked up, like take your pick, insurrection, actually, right? There's no basis for this idea, right? That I'm aware of, right? But if it's suddenly blasted across this giant megaphone and all these different sort of very, very loud voices in media and so forth are repeating it, then there's this perceived idea of consensus, right? This is again going back to what really troubles me and keeps me up at night, because you could come up with any number of things, any number of slogans, statements that have been field tested against, basically, for a positive response of the public, and you can kind of convince people of something which is, on the face of it, kind of silly or just simply wrong, and in fact, and hurts a lot of people, right? We've seen this happen. So there's something about this issue of the amplification of certain voices over others, and the power to do that we have to look at.
Winning is an important part of this for sure. We've got to show those victories. To brag on my team again, we got a settlement. We didn't even have to do a confidentiality agreement on it. It may seem like small dollars. Until you realize that it sends a very important message. We just got a $150,000 settlement for a defamation suit that we brought for General Flynn. I think it was last month. That's just us. There's other great defamation lawyers that are out there right now that are pounding the pavement, that are getting great results. Pay attention to the victories, amplify the victories, amplify the victories of people who are fighting back against fake stories. Nobody is on camera doing that as much as Kash right now, and setting the record straight against all the many lies that are out there that he is able to very ably explain. No one's able to do that as concisely as Erica on Tom's perspective, and then beyond at times everybody are the ones out there amplifying the wins by correcting the record.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause.
No, I didn't. I come up with something. You kind of cut me off. I mean, in terms of amplification, I think just really quickly, because I have a lot of people who call this the silent majority. Don't silent. I mean,
Beautiful. One thing.
Sponsors, don't sponsor.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Don't sponsor them. Guys, thank you so much for being here today.
Yes, there's coffee and pastries outside the door. You can come outside here for an hour.
Thank you, everybody.